As someone who's always had trouble with tight hamstrings, I've spent a lot of time trying to find an effective way to stretch them. And today I'd like to share that information with you. How you can stretch your hamstrings easily, safely, effectively. Hi, I'm Kashmir, and today we're looking at hamstring stretches. Now, I'm not going to go over all the theory about stretching. If you want the detail of that, I have it up in my earlier videos. Today I want to concentrate on the hamstring. But just a quick overview, just in case you have missed the other videos. When you stretch, you should be stretching a warm, non-working muscle. And you should target specific muscles. So you don't sort of do a general stretch. You decide what you need to stretch and you stretch that as closely and as accurately as you can. Today we're looking at hamstrings. The whole point of stretching is that muscle's got to be relaxed enough that you can actually pull the muscle fibers apart. So you can't, for example, do a standing hamstring stretch. Well, you can, but you only can do the leg that you aren't standing on. If you're standing on both legs, you cannot stretch your hamstrings. I'll have people say, oh, I can feel the stretch. No, you can't. What you're feeling is you're feeling the muscle working. So an important thing to learn if you're going to be doing any stretch work is to feel the difference between a working muscle and a stretching muscle. Standing here at the moment, I am not stretching my hamstrings. The hamstrings are those big muscles at the back of my thigh are keeping me from falling over. They are working, therefore I cannot be stretching them. So does that mean if I flop over, I can stretch my hamstrings? No. When you're flopped over, your hamstrings are holding you up. They cannot stretch because they are holding you up. On the downside, if you do those flop overs, you put a lot of strain on your lower back. If you're doing them properly, you're hanging from one vertebra, half your body weight hanging from one poor wee joint. It's not doing a stretch and it is possibly doing your back injury. So please don't do flop overs. If touching your toes is the wrong way to stretch, by the way, there's nothing wrong with touching your toes. Touching your toes is a good way to actually work out how much flexibility you have got in your hamstrings. There are better ways. But you actually need a person to do it. So you can lie down, completely relax, and a person can actually lift up your leg and see how far it will go and take an angle. So this is a way of actually measuring if you've got any progress, but you need a person to give you a hand. They can say, okay, at the moment you only can lift your leg up to 45 degrees, and you should be able to get it up to 90. And so you do a series of stretches, and then they measure it again. Okay, we're now up to 55. You're doing the right thing. Let's continue if we can get it all the way up. When you're touching your toes, it's a little bit more difficult because it gives you a rough idea whether or not you've got flexibility in your hamstrings. But what also comes into it is your glutes, how tight they are, and your back. So when I was a young dancer many years ago, I practiced so hard touching my toes to actually increase my hamstrings. Well, I got down so I could actually put my palms on the floor and give a bit of a bend, but my hamstrings still seemed tight. And I'd got most of the movement out of my lower back, and unfortunately a lot of that has actually been permanent, so I've now got an unstable lower back. Never mind. So how can you do this safely? There's a number of ways you can do it. The simplest way to do a hamstring standing stretch is to actually do it by putting your leg up on something. So you stand there, the leg that's up is the one that is actually the one that's doing the work. Take it up bent, you don't actually need to force it down, and then just sort of gently lean over it, get it going, and just take it to the point where you start to feel it stretching. You're not actually taking it as far as you can, because if you do that, it's not going to work. Just take it so you can just start to feel that resistance. At that point, stop, breathe, just keep on breathing, and you'll get to the point where the muscle starts to feel like it's softening. It's like, oh, I don't seem to be getting the stretch anymore. In that case, give it a bit more. Bend over a little bit more or lift it a bit higher. This is one problem with the standing stretch. You tend not to have nice steps that you can actually take your leg up on. If you do have that, that's great. But in most cases, in the places I've been to, you've got a chair or you've got the bar, and there's nothing in between. So that's a bit of a problem. You can also do it sitting, where you actually lean over your leg. Again, due to my back problem, I don't want to do that because I will get that movement from my back. So that's quite a useful thing to remember, that the thing that has the most give is the thing that will give. So in my case, what I tend to do is I do a lying hamstring stretch, and I start by actually stretching my glutes, bringing my knee into my chest, releasing the glutes. Once they're released, then I can actually start on the leg. And the advantage here is that you can put it wherever you feel like it. So you've got an infinite number of positions to put in, but the same principles. Bring it through, wait till you feel that softening, breathe, pull it in a bit more. Breathe, pull it in a bit more. So this is the process that you go through. How long do you hold a stretch? Well, it depends. You're looking for that softening. With a big muscle like a hamstring, you're holding for 30 seconds, a minute, maybe even longer. So you need to hold until you feel it, and you need to repeat a couple of times. How often is every second day, probably as a minimum. Once a week doesn't do it. Now this is one reason why I don't spend a lot of time doing stretches in my classes. If your only stretch you're doing is at the end of class, it's a complete waste of time. Hope that helps. Happy stretching.